Fantastic. Good evening. I see that we have, I believe, all members of the council in attendance, if I'm counting correctly. And so I will call this meeting to order, the special legislative meeting to order at 7:32 p.m. Members of the council, you have before you an agenda. Are there any amendments to the agenda required? And are there any conflicts of interest for agenda items? I'll accept silence as a no on both. Okay, not seeing anybody unmuting or waving their hands or anything. I will ask for a motion to approve the agenda as submitted.
Approve it.
Second.
Motion by member Kellon, seconded by Councilmember Smith. Is there any discussion of the motion to approve the agenda as submitted? Are there any public comments? Okay, on that, I will do a roll call vote. Councilmember Smith,
Aye.
Councilmember Foe,
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua, Councilmember Lingua.
I believe we lost the mayor.
I think we did.
He's quick. He's joining again.
Oh, look at him go.
Thought it was a coup. It's good to hear. It wasn't.
Hi, yeah.
Buddy.
This energy
Aye.
is now constant.
Aye, by the way. Sorry.
Thank you. I disappeared myself. I apparently hit the leave meeting as opposed to okay for recording. So there we are with Councilmember Lingua, Councilmember
Aye.
Inyang,
Aye.
Councilmember Mejia,
Aye.
Councilmember Kellon,
Aye.
and I abstain. The motion passes 6-0. Are there any public comments for this special legislative meeting? Okay, hearing none, not seeing any microphones unmuting. We will move on to the presentation. Review of edits to the fiscal year 2025 proposed operating and capital improvement budget. Deputy Director Gentry Jones.
And I'm going to have a little introductory comment, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
So first, I want to thank Mr. Jones, Mr. Smith for their work on the budget and the broader staff team as well, along with the input that we received at the public hearings from members of the community and members of the mayor and council. Mr. Jones is going to review the edits that we made. There may still be typos in the book. And so we're going through the budget book, looking for typos in text, missing comma here, word choice there, type of a thing. But none of that has an impact on the actual budget. And then even post-introduction, the mayor and council are able to direct changes to the budget between introduction and adoption. So over the next couple of weeks, you'll be able to make changes in between, and staff may have one or more proposed tweaks as well. We're working through some items that we learned about today on one of our capital improvement projects. So we may propose something to you all next week. We just don't know yet. So we'll wait and see what we learn tomorrow. And with that, Mr. Jones, I would ask that you walk the mayor and council through the edits that you and Mr. Smith made over the last week.
Sure. So as Town Manager Lestitia mentioned,
There have been a lot of cosmetic changes that we've made, corrections to typos and things of that nature. But two of the things that we wanted to highlight tonight that changed from the last budget presentation that we had. First being the $10,000 that we moved from contingency funds and admin services. That was moved to development services. This change was to provide funds to provide micro grants to eligible businesses and organizations hosting events in the town. Additionally, we had two positions that were paid out of the Economic Development Fund in the administration portion of what was formerly the Economic Recovery Strategy Fund. So we moved funds from that admin portion of the Economic Recovery Strategy Fund to the finance services. There we have a grant manager position, which we showed in the budget, but we're actually putting the funds there. So the operating budget has increased to reflect that change. Additionally, there was a neighborhood ambassador position that was also funded from the admin portion of the Economic Recovery Strategy Fund. Those funds have also been moved to the Department of Public Works. So with that, we also had to increase the transfer amount in the fund balance sheet. So you'll see additionally that we have increased the amount that was transferred from the fund balance sheet to the operating budget. And that would reflect as well in both the Department of Public Works as well as the finance services. So yeah, those were the two major changes. Again, that affected the fund balance sheet. It did increase the overall operating budget to reflect those changes. And then we had the changes in finance services as well as public works. And as Town Manager Lestitian mentioned, we are continuing to make edits and reviews. So any other changes that we have, we will present as well.
Thank you, Deputy Director Jones. Are there questions for Deputy Director Jones about these changes? These questions can come from council or members of the public as you see fit. Okay, sounds like everyone is happy with those. I would say that they are, for the most part, sort of bookkeeping and careful transparency rather than substantive changes. So that concludes, unless there's anybody who wants to speak, that concludes the presentation. And we can move on to the agenda to legislative action item number 1, introduction of ordinance 2024-OR-02 regarding the fiscal year 2025 budget and tax rates.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to introduce an ordinance 2024-OR-02. This is an ordinance concerning our FY 2025 budget and tax rates. And this introduction for this ordinance, and this ordinance is for the purpose, well, it's for the following, for the purpose of adopting operating and capital budgets for the town of Riverdale Park, and that's going to be for the fiscal year beginning July 1, 2024, and that will end June 30, 2025. It's also for setting rates of real and personal property and operating property taxation for the said fiscal year and levying such taxes. It's also for matters generally relating to the adoption of town budgets and levying of taxes, as well as setting of tax rates for the town for the fiscal year aforementioned.
Thank you for that introduction, Councilmember Lengua. Appreciate that.
You're quite welcome.
So we traditionally do not discuss this item at introduction, any legislative action item, any introduction of an ordinance. So let's move, unless there's an overwhelming need, then let's move along to new business. Are there any item? Oh, Councilmember Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to confirm we will have opportunity for robust discussion around this when it comes up prior to coming up for a vote.
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Just making sure I understand the Robert's rules of it all correctly. All right, thank you.
Okay. That brings us to new business. Are there any items of new business? Are there any items of unfinished business? Hearing none, may I please have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Foe, seconded by Councilmember Inyang by 30 milliseconds. This is neither debated nor discussed, so I'll move immediately to a roll call vote. Councilmember Smith? Councilmember Smith? I'll loop back to Councilmember Smith. Councilmember Foe?
Aye.
Councilmember Lingua?
Aye.
Councilmember Inyang?
Aye.
Councilmember Mejia?
Aye.
Councilmember Callan?
Aye.
Councilmember Smith, are you back?
He's dropped.
He's dropped. I'll take his drop as being a temporarily absent and say the motion passes 5-0. We are adjourned at 7:43 p.m. We now move on to the work session. The work session is a much more informal event, meeting, and so don't need to have quite as strict Robert's rules, but we are observing them. So I officially call it to order at 7:43 p.m. Are any changes required to the agenda, members of the council? I would suggest that just for good luck to meet the why don't we add under work session discussion items, item 8, fiscal year 2025 budget, just so we can discuss it if there's anybody who wants to discuss it. Any concerns about that? I need to actually add it, or I will.
I've none.
Okay. I'm adding this to my version of the agenda so I don't forget when we get down there. Okay. I think that means we are moving on to our presentation, which is the tree inventory and management plan.
Mr. Mayor, if I may introduce our guest. Good evening, Mayor and council members, members of the community, guests and staff. Tonight's presentation is an overview of the completed tree inventory and tree management plan. The project was funded through the Planning Department's planning assistance to municipalities and communities. It's my pleasure to introduce Anu Cherie Nair with the Planning Department, Community Planning Division, and she will introduce Mr. Ketchum, the project consultant. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you all hear me good?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Ivy, for the introduction.
Very welcome.
I'm Anushree Nair, Planner 2 with the Prince George's County Planning Department, Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, also the project manager for this project. I'm also joined by Sean Ketchum, our consultant from Wetland Studies and Solutions, Inc. I can give a brief introduction and then Sean will present the draft tree management plan. Via the Community Planning Division's Planning Assistance to Municipalities and Communities program, in December 2021, the town of Riverdale Park had applied for a funding for a consultant to develop a street tree inventory and management plan. This project was approved by the Planning Board in May 2022 and was awarded to LPDA, now Kimley Horn, and there are some contractors, Wetlands. With this management plan, the town of Riverdale Park seeks to maintain, expand, and protect the town's tree population and canopy, create fully tree-lined streets through annual tree planting, make data-driven funding and tree maintenance decisions, and educate and engage residents. This project was scoped to assess the condition of trees and public rights of way within the municipal boundary and provide town staff with the tools and data to make informed decisions on protecting, maintaining, and expanding the town's tree inventory. Data collected was entered into the Prince George's County Department of Public Works and Transportation's Planted Geo Tree Plotter software to generate graphic and spatial representations of existing conditions that reveal needs and opportunities to decision makers, funders, and community members. The project was kicked off in January 2023. Over the course, we also revised the scope of the project to include the additional trees identified by the town and the consultants during the field survey. A draft tree inventory and condition assessment was presented to the town staff in October 2023, and the draft tree management plan was presented in January 2025. Since then, the consultants have been working on the final report. We appreciate this opportunity to present to the town council, and with that, I will hand it over to Sean to present.
Thank you.
My name is Sean Ketchum. I'm the Urban Forestry Manager at Wetland Studies and Solutions out of Millersville, Maryland. And are we going through this PDF, or should I share a PowerPoint? Somebody driving this PDF? All right, I take that. I share the PowerPoint. Okay, let me get my screen up. Okay, and you're seeing the presentation?
Yes.
Great. Okay. As Anu said, the purpose of this tree inventory assessment management plan is really to understand what the resource is and what the major issues are and opportunities are, because you can't manage something until you have some idea of what you actually have. So just a little background on our firm. We're a environmental and cultural resources firm based out of Gainesville, Virginia, founded in 1991. And then over time, we expanded our services. We were acquired by the Davey Tree Expert Company in 2014. And we've been expanding quite a bit since then. You can see we do quite a few different, have a bunch of different service lines around environmental and cultural resources. So we have survey department, archaeology, landscape architecture. We do a lot of stream restoration, et cetera. But we're going to be talking about urban forestry, which is my favorite thing. So as I said, we want to know what we have so we can provide for some proactive management, which means knowing what trees are there, what size they are, what condition they're in, and what kind of maintenance they need. And thinking for the future, where are there opportunities to plant additional trees, and what kinds of trees might make sense in those locations. So based off of the inventory data, we kind of zoom back out and look at the urban forest in aggregate and see what is the structure of the forest, what is it providing, and think more holistically about how you move forward, incorporating management of the trees in a professional way into your town operations. So as I said, we're summarizing the maintenance needs, maintenance schedule, additional plantings. So what do? We sent out a bunch of arborists. All of our arborists are ISA certified arborists. Most, if not all, have the tree risk assessment qualification as well. They're pretty experienced folks. What they're doing is what's called a level 2 assessment, which is ground-based, looking all around the tree, not using any special tools other than a hand tool. By contrast, a level 1 would be, essentially a walk by or drive by, and a level 3 you'd be doing more advanced assessment, like getting up in the crown or using some specialized decay detection tools or something like that. So basic pedestrian tree inventory. So they're recording the species, measuring the diameter, noting any relevant defects, site characteristics, utility presence, clearance issues, and providing a maintenance recommendation. The data was recorded in the Tree Plotter software, which is urban forest management software. created by Planet Geo. And you can see that a lot of Prince George's County communities are using this same system. Every one of those dots is a tree or a planting location. It has a lot of tools for management, reporting, and so on. And it also uses the iTree system for estimating environmental benefits. So what did we find? We found 2,121 trees, 29 stumps, 321 planting spaces. This is, we're looking in within the right of way. And you can see that the estimated annual monetary benefit from those trees is about $14,000. And it does give you a lifetime carbon storage benefit of $163,000. So the system that's powering this is run in part by the Forest Service and a bunch of other researchers, and it's consistently updated with the latest research and going back 30 years now. So it's the best thing that we have out there for turning what trees do into dollar values. So now we want to look at more of the canopy and aggregate and how well structured is it. And when we mean structure, we're talking about species, age, and condition. So in terms of condition, things are looking pretty good. You can see that there were very few dead, critical, or poor trees. 55% of the trees were healthy, and 36% were fair condition. That fair condition category is, that's where your uncertainty is a little bit, because sometimes fair means this would be otherwise a really good tree, if not for, this one defect that's not correctable, or it could be this tree is struggling and declining, but it's not poor yet. So this is a pretty nice mix, honestly. So in urban forestry, there's an old rule of thumb called the 10-20-30 rule, and that's that a single species should compose no more than 10% of the tree population, a single genus no more than 20%, and a single family no more than 30%. As time has gone on, you can see the citation there is from 1990. The importance of increased diversity has become more apparent. So there are people who would advocate for, maybe double this diversity or more. So the message is, think of this as a baseline where if you're out of whack in one of these, you really need to start putting some effort into diversifying the tree canopy. But even if you're not, it's still a good idea to diversify the tree canopy to provide a more resilient urban forest. So in terms of species, we're looking at no more than 10%, and we have willow oak at 11% and Callery pear at 10%, and then red maple leyland kind of just below. In terms of management decisions, the leyland is not that big a deal. They're relatively short-lived trees and have problems, but most of these trees are actually in one long line, and so it's not really, it's a small geographic footprint for this portion of the canopy. Willow oaks, that's probably should be coming off the planting list for a while, and Callery pear is something that should be managed. This is a real challenge. They were planted really abundantly in the 80s and 90s, and it's since become apparent that they have serious structural issues that are inherent to the species, and that they are also extremely invasive. So reducing the proportion of Callery pear in the urban forest should be a high priority. In terms of genera, Quercus, that's the oaks. You can see you're below 20%, even though we do have 11% willow oak. Maples is Acer at 14%, and Pyrus, that's your pears there, and Cupressus cyparis, those are their leylands. And then prunus would be your flowering cherries and things like that. So doing, according to the 30-20-10 rule, you're doing fine for the genus. And then in terms of family, we have Fagaceae, that's your oaks and beeches. And again, just sitting just under that threshold. Rosaceae, that's your pears and cherries. Then Sapindaceae, that's your maples, elms, and your cypress. So again, oaks are fantastic, but you're putting a lot of eggs in one basket with having nearly 30% oaks. We don't have a major killer of oaks like we had for ash with the emerald ash borer, but that's certainly a possibility. And there are serious oak diseases out there like bacterial leaf scorch and oak wilt that could cause serious problems if they took hold in this area. So that's something to be aware of. In terms of age, there's not a very good way to assess that in the field and not a very good proxy. So we use size as a proxy for age. It's okay, but it's not perfect. So understand that we're dealing with imperfect information here. Some of these trees just aren't going to get big, and even if they're older, but it's the best that we can come up with that gives you that you can use the existing data for and that you can compare over time. And the idea here is that you want to have that next generation of trees growing and ready to take over as the older ones age out. In an urban area, trees usually aren't allowed to get so big and old that they fall apart. So there's always that kind of attrition as time goes on. So you want to have, about 40% of your trees in that young, recently planted first 10, 15 years of life, and then kind of step down over time. So you can see that things are generally pretty good, except that we have this maturing class. There's a pretty big gap between that and the established, and between that and the mature. So as those continue to grow and get older and you increase the attrition, there's going to be a little bit of a gap in terms of having that next generation ready to go, but it's still pretty good. And then in terms of condition by age class, this is pretty much a mirror of what we saw earlier in terms of the overall canopy. Young trees tend to be in good condition, which is what you would expect. They haven't had a lot of time for defects to become serious or to accumulate damage. But even as we get to that mature class, you can see that there's not really a major difference in the health condition between mature, maturing, established. They're all around 50% good and 40% fair. So doing pretty well. In terms of high priority maintenance, these are things that yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I think we have a question.
I'll hold
hand raised. Yeah.
I'll hold for the end. That's fine. Thank you.
No problem.
In terms of high priority maintenance, we actually didn't find all that many that were like, you should remove this right now. You need to prune this large limb right now. So we had 14 high priority pruning recommendations and 10 high priority removal recommendations, and these were already provided. In terms of secondary maintenance, these are your low priority routine maintenance items. So crown cleaning, that's essentially dead wooding of large dead limbs. Amending mulch, it can mean either adding mulch where there's none right now, or breaking apart those mulch volcanoes. Those cause a lot of issues at the bases of a tree and can really cause a lot of damage. Especially, it tends to be contagious in a neighborhood. Somebody volcano mulches a tree and then somebody else sees them do it, and copycats. So that's an important one. I don't want to downplay mulching. It doesn't sound exciting, but it's important. Clearance pruning, this will be either away from buildings, structures, sidewalks, roadways. More routine removals, those are ones that don't present a real imminent risk. And then structural pruning, this is really important for young trees, so you don't end up with, having to remove a really large limb that could have been corrected when that limb was an inch big. So training young trees is an extremely cost-effective way of providing maintenance. In terms of planting spaces, forget exactly how many I said we had. We around 320, I think. So we have sites for large, medium, and small trees, and that's largely driven by the soil volumes and overhead utilities. And that's the end of the presentation. So I will take questions now.
Thank you, Mr. Ketchum. Councilmember Smith, you had your hand up earlier.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Ketchum and Ms. Nair for being here with us today. This is really great information. Can tell that a lot of work went into it. I do have a question about the number of Bradford pear trees that we have in town. I know Ms. Lewis and her team have a plan to eradicate those. Is that correct, Ms. Lewis?
We've gotten different advice on that tip from our counterparts in surrounding jurisdictions. So I don't know that we've had that discussion, but if that's recommended, that's something we'll plan to do.
I would say as a longer term goal, yes, eradication is desirable. That said, those trees are providing some public benefit right now in terms of ecosystem services. Some have better structure than others. And so I would recommend gradually bringing those down, starting with some of the ones with the ugliest structure that are most likely to fall apart. Things that are clearly struggling, like if it's low fare, you put that on the list for next year or the following year. So I think eventually replacing it is fantastic, but keeping in mind that that's what 8% of the trees, right? What 8 or 10%, and taking all of those trees down at the same time, that's a lot of stormwater runoff that you're not capturing. That's a lot of shading that's not happening. So even though they're crummy trees, they are providing something. So yes, how fast you want to ramp down to zero, that's up to you. But and I don't think it has to happen all at once. I mean, the cat's out of the bag. If you were driving around last month, you saw probably tens or hundreds of thousands of escaped Callery pear.
Thank you for that, Mr. Ketchum. And I appreciate your use of the scientific term crummy trees. It makes me really at home in this discussion that is otherwise above my head.
That's an art term.
So my question is, as we, whether we're eradicating those outright, which sounds like may not be the best solution immediately, but it is, as you mentioned, a sizable percentage of our canopy. And I was noticing on that slide with the percentages that we're already at 11% on oak, which is, as you mentioned, above the 10%. So that percentage only goes up as we remove Bradford pears, right? So is the solution to that just like planting something better when we remove a Bradford pear? And if so, is there a recommendation other than just more of what we got, right? Because we don't want to increase those percentages necessarily. I did see that the percentage of cherry is fairly low. And just from an aesthetic perspective, I support more of those. But interested in thoughts on how we transition to something more sustainable as we look to, from what I'm hearing over time, remove the Bradford pears.
Yeah. So, and I think there are a few questions in there. So yes, as you remove the Bradfords, that opens up a planting space where you can put a better tree. And there's more and more species available commonly on the market than there has been in the past. A lot of municipalities, especially in this area, are getting the memo, and that's driving what's available in the nursery trade. So there are other large trees other than oaks. You know, I'm not saying don't plant any oaks because you don't want to end up with a situation where all of your oaks are old. You want to, but de-emphasize.
Sure.
And especially willow oak because you've got quite a few of those. In terms of cherries, you could plant more cherries. There are, quite a few different varieties of flowering cherry. But what I would say is that you want to match the tree to the site. Those are fantastic underwire trees. I would prefer to see those go underneath a utility line and not in a place where you could put a big tree, because you don't want to lose the opportunity to grow a big tree if you've got a space for it.
Certainly, and that was more folksy anecdote. I wouldn't want us to spend a ton of time on that, but definitely appreciate the insight there and the work that went into this between you and Ms. Nair. Great stuff. Love to see us investing in our tree canopy and doing things all around that make us a more sustainable community. So thank you.
And there's another question.
Councilmember Lingua, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much, Mr. Ketchum. Sticking to this question here regarding the Bradford pear, the fact that it's 8% of our tree canopy. You're talking about transitioning here. By your estimation, a reasonable timeline for evolving the canopy, and we're just going to work right now with this one variable here, the Bradford pear that we have in town. Taking it from, say, 8% of the entire canopy to 2% of the entire canopy. In your estimation, what time frame would be prudent doing this in a gradual way for a community of our size to do?
Yeah, that's a good question. And it really does depend on budget and resources.
Right.
I would say that if budget was not a concern,
well, it will be.
tapering them, but I'm just trying to speak in the abstract here. If it wasn't a concern, I would say tapering them down over the course of a decade is a reasonable time frame. Maybe even 15 years. Because there's a lot that is going on with managing an urban forest. Sure. And you don't want to be devoting all of your resources to handling removal of Bradfords and planting replacements, and then just dealing with high priority maintenance issues.
Exactly.
You want to be making sure that you have enough resources to do the structural pruning of young trees, to be planting in other areas and kind of expanding the pool of planting spaces, and dealing with more routine maintenance like clearance and things like that. So, just keeping in mind that you have a lot to manage, and this is an important thing, but it shouldn't be the only focus.
Oh, it wouldn't be, and that's why I was asking to bring it down to that point in a way that's going to be responsible, in a way that's going to allow the canopy to maintain some type of consistency, if not augmentation, but also being that we're a municipality that's limited on resources. Now, granted, we can try and go after grant funding and all, but I mean that's going to be a challenge as well. And as well, we're going to try and put as much resources that we have into it. But I think the majority of that effort is going to come from a combination of state, federal, or foundation resources in the future. So you're saying roughly anywhere to a ambitious 10 years to a less ambitious 15 years.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable. And then it gives you time to,
To deal,
just
to
a
address
new
other issues as they come up.
Yeah, exactly. And then you don't have, oh, we took out all the Bradfords and now everything that was in one of those spots is 2 years old. And it's all
Right.
the same time frame. So you want to stagger your planting a little bit.
So, okay, I could go with another question, but I'm not going to. I'm going to allow other ones to get questions. Thank you very much for
You're
that.
welcome.
Councilmember Inyang, go ahead.
Thank you. Appreciate the report and all the work that went into it. Extremely impressive. My question was around, you mentioned that I think these were trees only on the right of way. Were like the hiker biker trail considered the right of way, or were those trees not considered for this study?
That's a good question. And I'll say we also got government properties. So town properties we did get. I didn't do the field work. Some of my arborists did that. So I'm not sure if the hiker biker trail was on that. Ivy, do you recall, was that on the right of way map that we had?
I would actually think that they were not included. Because we specifically stressed within the public right of way or tree box between the curb and sidewalk for the most part.
Got it. The only reason I asked is I know very recently, a few weeks ago, a lot of those trees seem to be cut, I'm assuming by Pepco. Kind of, I'm no arborist at all, but looked like a hack job in terms of like a couple of trees like severely cut. And I'm not sure about the health of those trees. A lot of them were newer trees as well. And so it was just curious if we had a sense of the type of trees. Was that work done normally? That happened maybe, I don't know, 6 weeks ago, maybe. So maybe that wouldn't have been included in the report either way. But maybe this is a question for Ivy, I guess, then.
Actually, let me qualify my previous answer. Certainly within Riverdale Park Station section of the trolley trail, they were counted. But south of Wells Run to Madison Avenue, they were not. And so I did hear from the management at Riverdale Park Station that I think they shared your view that Pepco's trimming of those trees below the power line was not well done. In fact, they talked about maybe perhaps replacing them and starting anew in that location. I only had one conversation, so I'm not sure if that thought took root, but they were not satisfied with the quality of the work.
And I would say that if you haven't already, you should reach out to Pepco. Their arborist, Nathan McElroy, is a good resource for that kind of thing. And he'll be able to tell you, yes, this was done in the way that is according to standard for utility pruning, or if it was not. And, if he's got the ability to make things right from Pepco's side.
I appreciate that, because I think also, especially hearing that certain trees, like cherry trees that you mentioned, are probably good for underneath utilities. The type of trees as well, if they, making sure that if the trees are replaced or the trees that are there make sense for like the environment that they're in. Because some of them are kind of underneath power lines, and other of them, the power lines are pretty tall up. So I think it'd have to be a pretty big tree, but I'm not sure if the type of trees that are there would at some point pose a risk to the utility lines.
Right. And they, utility arborists get a bad rap a lot of the time, but it is important to note that the reason they're trimming the tree is that an inappropriate tree was planted there at some point to begin with. So they're doing the best they can with a mistake that may have been made 20, 30, 40 years ago. In some cases, or in most cases, not always, and they do work fast, which sometimes leads to issues. But having the right tree for the utility area is really important, and it helps reduce these kinds of conflicts going forward.
Thank you. I'm sure the town staff will reach out. Appreciate the help.
Any additional council questions for Mr. Ketchum?
Hello, good evening, everybody.
Councilmember Calhoun, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question for Mr. Ketchum. Now, Mr. Ketchum, I don't know whether you can furnish the mayor and council with the documentation where you plant trees, where you replace some trees, and the location of the trees, where you plant them, and so that in the future, mayor and council, some of them can go and inspect this work you have done. Do you think you can furnish us with this documentation?
Well, all of the tree and planting locations are in the tree plotter system, which Ivy, you have access to, right?
I do not. I've actually talked with staff in DPW&T about getting interim access. Ultimately, we'll have to purchase the software.
Okay. Well, in the meantime, you can get a shapefile downloaded
Right.
for the information, because the
Yes.
information is mobile. You should be able to take it with you.
Yeah.
But having that live system that you can update and it's always, always accurate depending on the inspection schedule, that's really a nice thing to have when you're trying to manage. But yes, all of the locations can be provided, so anybody could go and take a look at and verify the information.
Mhm.
Okay.
But I'm expecting, though, if I may, that the management plan includes a list of locations for new plantings.
We include the map, but the live data is the ultimate source. So if you want those locations outside of Tree Plotter, we'd have to get you a shapefile,
Okay.
or have MNCPPC get you a shapefile.
Okay.
Okay, did you answer my question yet? Do you can furnish the mayor and council with all this documentation and the location of the trees where you plant them, so that in the future, some of us can go and inspect the work that you have done? Can you do that?
Councilmember Callan, the answer was yes. The shapefile can be turned into a report that will be provided to all members of the council.
Okay, well, that's okay. Thank you.
Of course. Are there any additional council questions or comments? Are there questions or comments from members of the public? I know there are people who have been eagerly awaiting this report, and one hand is up. Ms. Katz, go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much to the council and staff for getting this report done, and of course, Maryland National Capital Park and Planning, and Mr. Ketchum for being the vehicle upon which we can get this done. Thank you. So one question I have is regarding champion trees. Mr. Ketchum, are you familiar with the champion tree designation? I guess is it a Maryland thing? I'm not.
In what sense? In like the Maryland Big Tree Program?
Yes, sir. An official designation of a tree as a champion tree.
I'm familiar with that. Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks. So I'm sure you probably know more about it than I do, but I was curious if that doesn't seem to have been a aspect of this assessment. Is that correct? That champion trees were not identified, or potential trees that would qualify to be champions could be identified from this data?
So you could certainly run a report from the data, see what the biggest trees are by species, and follow up on that. The methodology for measuring them for champion tree status is really involved. I've spent probably 2.5 hours measuring one tree for champion status. It's involved. So no, that's
even
not
when it's obvious. Even when it's obvious, or seriously,
you've got to show your work, and measuring crown dimensions can get really finicky. So if you've got an unbalanced crown, if you've got you've got to do like a hub and spoke type of system and a bunch of math, it can be complicated. So not all of them are that complicated, but
so that would not include
it's beyond what we would typically do in a level 2 inspection. But this is really the focus of this is getting basic data about the urban forest and what is the management need.
if I have one other item I want to mention, and then I will stand back for anyone else that wants to ask you questions. But I just wanted to note, you talked a bit about oaks, willow oak in particular within our town seemed to be the primary, that's a species, willow oak?
Right, yes.
Yeah. I just, and the principle of diversity, et cetera, I totally understand that, but I just want to mention that from an ecological standpoint, oak trees are incredibly beneficial, almost more so than many others. The number of different diversity of caterpillars that they feed or that appear on them is significant, really significant. And the fact that it takes them so long to grow, well, maybe not all of the species, but some of the oaks, can take quite a while for them to reach their big size. So I just, I don't know, I was hopeful that maybe you'd recommend some other oak species instead of not oaks for a bit.
Well, so you've read Doug Tallamy's book, which is good.
Yes, I've seen the videos. Yes.
And I love oaks. They're really good. But there are different considerations that you have to make when you're looking at a population level versus what you might have on an individual level on your property. Oaks are fantastic, but we don't want to get to a situation where we've got 15% oaks and then oak wilt really takes hold. Now you're in a really bad spot where you're either treating hundreds of trees, spending your entire budget on that, or you're spending your budget on removals and you're losing all of those trees. So making sure that you have a urban forest structure that is diverse enough to be resilient to a single pest or pathogen is really critical. Even the disbursement of trees within that area is important. You remember that Dutch elm disease spread a lot through root grafts because they were planted too close. It also spread through the bark beetle, hopping from tree to tree. If you move things out geographically, those sorts of vectors are diminished. So I agree. Oaks are fantastic. I love them. But I would still de-emphasize oaks for a while, and particularly willow oak. There are a lot of really good oak species that grow in this area, and I would be diversifying between like the red oak group and white oak group, doing maybe overcup oak and bur oak and swamp white, swamp chestnut, things like that. But again, trying to balance that with the needs of the overall canopy, and then understanding that future threats are uncertain or unknown, and we need to hedge against whatever's the next big thing's going to be. What's the next EAB? We don't know, and we're not going to know until it hits us. So diversification.
Hearing we want to avoid tree COVID, is that correct?
Exactly.
I appreciate your point. I definitely do. I just, yeah. All right, I'll stand back for a sec. I have a couple other thoughts, but thank you.
I'm going to do a quick follow-up on that, which is that this survey is just of town street trees. And so the population as a whole, we don't actually know. I mean, I think there's a lot more trees that are not street trees. And it may be that while we have a lot of oaks on the edges of the streets, that we, in the town as a whole, we could still stand to have a few more, in which case we could do that with a private planting and program. And because we're talking about managing this from the town's perspective. Ms. Wayland.
Hi there. I feel like I might have missed this question, or you may have answered it, but did you provide to the town a plan for what kinds of things should be planted in all those missing spaces and so on?
Yes.
Is that part of what you provided?
So in the document that we've prepared, and we're doing the layout on the final right now, we do have a table of recommended tree species. And it's not exhaustive. There are certainly a lot of trees that are out there in the nursery trade that could be drawn from, understanding the principle of generally increasing diversity. But yes, we do have some recommendations for species.
Does that answer your question? Go ahead.
Yeah, I still have more question, I guess, as a follow-up, which is so you recommend species, but you don't recommend, you're giving guidelines for where to plant, or did you say, hey, this area needs more, more trees right now, or any of that kind of thing?
No, so yeah, within the right of way, which is our study area, we did have, actually, I think this is it right here. We did record individual open locations for planting. So these are, I mean, this is a snip of the map of open planting locations.
And Ms. Wayland, each location is color coded for whether it's a large, medium, or small tree.
Okay. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'm going to do a follow-up question on the diversity issue and the recommended species. For those recommendations, have you taken climate change into account at all for species that might be normally found a little bit south of us, but we might want to prepare for climate change by planting those?
Yes, that's a good point. Climate resilience is important as you're going forward. And I was actually just having this conversation with a nursery grower a couple of days ago, talking about potentially swapping out sugarberry for our native hackberry. So yes, climate resilience is an important part of selecting tree species, since you hope that they will be around for 50, 60, 70 years, and it could be a very different world at that point.
Mm-hmm. Ms. Wayland, do you still have a question? Your hand is up.
That is only because I don't know how to lower it on my phone.
Okay, very good. Are there other questions from members of the public? Ms. Katz, I thought you had some. There you are. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I'm not able to see who else is in the meeting, so if someone else other than me, please, yeah, don't call on me then. But lifespan, you just mentioned lifespan, and in the data you showed the significant amount of younger trees that we have in the public inventory there for the town, and that was a good thing. Well, help me understand. I have a concern with. And I think a good example would be those Riverdale Park Station trees that we were talking about, that have oak trees that were literally top capped, right off the top, and with volcano mulch to boot. But a tree that lives 5 years and then dies is not investing in that plan, I would think. So, and plus different species have different longevities too. The Bradford pear, potentially that's part of the problem with it, right? It's as it gets mature, it gets more and more problematic. So help me understand the management strategy here with regards to your data was based on size and not really longevity of species, or like you said, it was difficult to determine the actual age of a tree. But I would think based on the species and its size, that gives you, that's probably what you based it on, right?
Yeah, it's if you're trying to look at this population level information without getting too bogged down in minutia, that's about the best that you can do, understanding that it does have some issues with it. But I'm sorry, you had a question regarding that.
Yeah, no, great, good on you. I can talk in circles. Would we not want to have a higher percentage of the established category of trees versus the young? Because I'm finding that it's very disheartening watching these young saplings go in, get whacked by a lawnmower, or just not survive for a dry summer, that kind of thing. And it would seem to me that our strategic goal would be to really get trees to be the established category.
I mean, that's exactly right. The reality is that trees in urban areas, especially these street trees, tend to have a hard life. And you don't want to get into that pattern where you are investing in a new tree planting and then not providing proper care to get it established and then removing it within a few years and starting over again because your ROI is zero, negative at that point. You want to get the tree established and starting to work for you. So yes, the young tree care is extremely important, and that includes watering, for the first year especially, but 2 years would be nice. Making sure that you don't have that volcano mulch, working with the landscape crews or contractors to make sure that they understand how to work around trees, not taking the string trimmer around the trunk and girdling the trees. And then, as I mentioned earlier, young tree structural pruning is so important. It's so much easier and cheaper to make a little snip on a small tree instead of getting a crew out, shutting a street down and paying thousands of dollars to prune off a 10-inch branch that you knew 20 years ago was going to be an issue. So yes, that's important, but you are always going to have more young trees than established trees. That's just the nature of attrition in urban sites. They're stressful places for trees. They're not going to reach their genetic potential as they would maybe in the woods. And also in the woods, there's a lot of turnover of trees. So if you're not planting aggressively to stay ahead of that, you're going to eventually fall behind as fewer and fewer established trees. Things happen, and it's important to make sure that you're planting with that in mind.
I would also think it's a challenge when you're not, I understood the cons you said for planting trees close together, but that is kind of the natural state of them to be close together. They're finding out that they do have relationships in a sense through chemical interactions, and a larger tree can protect a smaller sapling as it's trying to grow up from drying out. There's other things, I guess. So I guess it's a different philosophy, street trees.
Well,
not a forest. It's not a forest.
It's not a forest. And I know what you're talking about. And close planting is neat. And I think there's a place for it, especially in parks or on like development sites to really advocate for that. One of the reasons that street trees have a set distance between them is because you want to maximize the amount of canopy per tree. So if you have a large tree and you plant it close together, it's going to end up with a narrower canopy, and you would end up paying more in terms of planting, maintenance, et cetera, for essentially the same amount of canopy. That's part of the trade-off of dealing with limited resources. And you're also introducing more obstacles into the roadway, more conflicts with sidewalks, more conflicts with neighbors. Like there's a lot of other considerations. If you're going to do close planting of large trees, I would say, well, let's expand the planting area. Let's make it better. Let's plan for avoiding future conflicts with infrastructure. But if you're just plugging it into an existing space and you've got limited resources, I think plan for the mature canopy size and plant it 35 foot on center, 30 foot on center. It's canopies will end up touching. You'll end up maximizing that aspect of the resource.
Ms. Wayland, you have your hand up again?
I do. I am one of the things, and this is what you've just been touching on. You've been talking about the parts of the plan that are overseen by the town, so on public space. There's a lot of private space in town, and it occurs to me that the thinking about the tree canopy in town should involve a coordinated effort between residents and the town so that we have a tree canopy that's healthy overall. And I'm just curious if there's any way to do that or encourage that kind of a coordinated effort.
Yeah, and that's the $64,000 question with urban tree management. There are carrot and stick approaches to managing trees on private property. So it could be fines for removal or things like that, or a permit system. to discourage that, you know, or it could be education and engagement, or all of that. So, you know, getting people out to tree plantings, campaigns against volcano mulch, young tree pruning, you know, advocating for that. It's really something that any homeowner can do. And then learning about the resource is tough because you've got thousands of landowners, right? But you know, there are sample-based methodologies where you can learn a little bit more about the overall tree canopy, including those areas. You know, there's also stuff like aerial canopy assessment that doesn't give you things like species level information, but it does give you, hey, where are the trees? You know, what areas are lacking canopy? So that's some good supplemental information that may or may not be out there. I know that a lot of Maryland urban areas had one done, I think, by the state DNR several years ago. But yeah, there's no magic bullet for integrating private property and municipal management. I would say if there are large landholders in the town, that's a decent place to start. And then, like I said, education and engagement is getting people interested and understanding the value and the benefits of the trees that they have and what they're providing to them, getting them excited.
Councilmember Lingua, your hand is up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Ketchum, regarding this last question about public-private, lack of a better term, coordinated effort towards a tree canopy. One of the things that we have in our budget this year is, along with our tree pruning activities that we'll be doing on trees in the public right-of-way, we're looking to open this as a way to get integration and get folks coordinate some type of effort, at least start to do so. We're looking at allowing folks to, and staff, please tell me if I'm using the wrong word here, piggyback on the contract. And my question to you, because I don't know if, not sure if you've seen this elsewhere, if you've seen this tried elsewhere or not, but based on your experience and your knowledge in this field, would there be a few do's and don'ts when engaging in such an endeavor?
I don't think I've heard about that exactly the same way. I know there are places that may have a fund to assist homeowners who have high-risk trees, but don't have the means to pay to remove the risk or lessen the risk. But, and maybe you can give me a little more information about what you mean by piggybacking. Are we talking about trees that are near the right-of-way on private property that are being pruned as part of a right-of-way management? Or is this, hey, I've got this thing in my backyard and it's got a big dead branch?
$64 question, sir, which I am going to defer to staff to present any parameters that they have so far established for this program.
So, good evening and thank you for being here. In terms of what Councilmember Ling was referring to, we've written into an invitation to bid that the pricing schedule for a tree maintenance company operating in town would have to have the same pricing schedule for any private property in town.
Got it. Okay.
And so it's more about our residents benefiting from our bidding process.
Got it. So they're getting the advantage of the economies of scale provided.
Yes. Yes. And they would be able to use a different company if they so choose, but it's open to the residents. And once we have that contract, which we anticipate having something to the mayor and council in June, once we have that, then we would advertise that to the residents.
I have not seen that before. I have seen like in areas with Emerald Ash Borer, I saw a presentation about providing funds for treating trees on private property. But I'm curious to see how it'll work out. I think that's a nice thing to be able to offer to residents.
Mr. Town Manager, you had your hand up earlier. Was that to answer this question, or did you have a question yourself?
No, I had a question myself, sir.
Well, go ahead. You're next.
And so this question's more for Ms. Nair. And it comes from this discussion about, the town has our property and our rights of way and our trees. And then we have our individual property owners who have trees. But by far, and I imagine, I haven't gone out counting, the owner of the vast majority of the tree canopy in Riverdale Park is MNCPPC. And so I am curious, and I think it's good information for the town to know, has MNCPPC undertook a similar survey to what we have just gone through? Do we have an understanding of what their share, and again, I think it's the lion's share of the tree canopy is here in Riverdale Park in terms of species and conditions and all those things? Do we have an understanding of that?
That's a good question, and I don't think I may have an answer to that. I might have to reach out to the Parks and Recreation to see if they've done any similar studies. I can definitely get back and see if I can help you with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from members of the public or members of the council? I have a few myself. Ms. Katz, go ahead.
Yeah, just a couple more things. I was curious, you called this a level 2 assessment and inventory.
Yes.
And I was curious what other data would be beneficial that would be a next step to be more strategic with the town trees.
So there were some trees identified during the course of this level 2 assessment that we had recommended a follow-up level 3 assessment. For most trees, a level 2 assessment regularly updated is perfectly adequate. And that's what I'm doing most of the time, or my staff is doing most of the time. In terms of additional information that might increase knowledge, as I said, a canopy assessment is interesting and useful data, and it gives you a very different perspective, and it crosses that public-private boundary. Of course, you don't get the depth of information that you get in a level 2 assessment, and certainly no maintenance recommendations, but that's an important piece that could be additive and help supplement and help to drive things like, well, we've got these planting locations. Are there areas that are also lacking in overall tree canopy, and maybe we hit those first? So that's another way I think of gathering information that could be integrated. And then you have to go back and reassess trees periodically. So anytime somebody goes out and remeasures a tree, looks up and sees how it's changed, because things change all the time. Just making sure that the inventory remains updated.
Could you give me an idea of what you're meaning by periodically?
3 years, 5 years.
Okay.
It depends. You can do a portion, 10% a year or 15% a year.
Would that be advantageous, like more regularly but less comprehensively?
There are multiple
Especially with
ways to do it.
pests.
So, and one is not really better than the other as long as it's a rolling update of the information.
And I just want to add on, with the amount of young trees that's recommended, is it, it seems like it would be beneficial to document the trend in their reaching that established stage, because it would, you might be able to detect maybe an issue that needs to be addressed. I hate to keep planting these young trees and then never getting much farther than 5 years old.
I agree. If you wanted to stratify the update and emphasize re-inspecting young trees at a period of, maybe 2 years instead, or 1 year, and then you can catch things like, all of these got volcano mulched at some point in the last year. We need to, maybe do some outreach, and we definitely need to do some correction. Or you can say all these trees in this strip are doing poorly, and why is that? Maybe it's soil related, maybe it's de-icing salts, or it gives you a chance to identify trends and common issues before they really take the tree out.
Well, as a member, as a resident, I would suggest, to the council and staff, I really think that's a very strategic approach and could save money over time as well, is having us reach our goals more successfully. So I appreciate the support for that kind of strategic approach. Thank you.
Okay, any additional citizen or non-council public members of the public with questions, or council members? Okay, as I said, I just have a few questions, hopefully fairly quick. Just one comment. You said the utility people get a bad rap, that usually it was just the wrong tree was planted in that place. And I can tell you that there's a tree on my property that I'm pretty sure pre-exists electricity in this neighborhood. And so I have a fight with the utility.
It's not always the case, but generally in an urban area, the line beats the tree.
Yeah, and I've worked out détente with the tree trimming people. They know how I feel, and they aren't trying to take the tree down anymore. I noticed on the list of planting locations that you had 25 stumps. About how long do we have to wait before we can plant in those areas?
You would grind it out, and then you could plant.
Okay, so you can
right away.
almost immediately after grinding out the stump?
You take out the chips, and then you've got a planting location.
That is fantastic news. The one question is whether the survey data includes the date at which the data was collected, or if you could just tell me the end date.
That's an automatic data field. That's the last time that the record was updated.
Okay, and just from zooming in on the various maps you have, then I have a bunch of questions, but I think I should probably just wait to get the shapefile. And so the question is, what do we need to do in order to get that shapefile?
I could export it, or Ivy, you could get it, or I don't know, you could get it. Like there, actually, Ivy, you would have to go through MNC PPC to get it.
So I would recommend that Director Lewis just works with you. We'll get a copy of it, Mr. Mayor, and then we'll make it available both on a website, and we'll send it out to the mayor and council.
Fantastic. And those are all of my questions. Ms. Katz, you have your hand up again.
Apologies, Mayor. I know you like to seal it up
That's
on
fine.
the end, but it just occurred to me. I noticed quite a few public right-of-way tree removals quite a while ago, last month, maybe even the month before that. And I was curious if I'm assuming those removals were once part of the recommended removals, but I saw in your data here there are quite a few recommended removals, 53 or something like that. And I was just wondering, staff are more removals scheduled?
None are currently scheduled. And it's usually in response to a complaint or an assessment that determines the tree is dead or diseased and needs to be removed. We've not received the final report. So we're seeing what you're seeing at this
Wow.
point.
Well, because there were some removals done then during this period that
Yes.
surprised me for
Yeah.
sure.
And they were of trees that were determined to be, again, either dead, diseased, or dying and dangerous.
Oh, the 4Ds. Wait.
Okay.
And I know one of them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ketchum, and thank you, Ms. Nair, appreciate
Thank you.
the data and the information and the advice, and we will be looking to get that final report and dig into implementing it as quickly as we can afford to do so. So
Sure.
thank you. Thank you again
Yeah.
for the
Thank you.
information. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you all.
Okay, that is the only presentation, and the next item on the agenda is my report. This was a comment that I had, but I didn't think we needed to have them here. The oak trees in Riverdale Park Station next to the trolley trail. I have a memory that during the landscape planning for the Cape Fritz development that I remarked on those trees, and the landscape designers said that they had an idea for an unusual set of trees there that would basically be intentionally topped. There's sort of an urban style where you have more tended to trees, more shaped trees. And I think that this might be part of that. That doesn't mean that whoever cut them didn't butcher them, but that's just a memory I thought I would share. The only other thing I want to mention in my report, I'll be presenting most of it next week, is that the COVID situation is actually looking pretty good. It's going down everywhere. DC is still a little bit higher than normal, so don't completely go crazy, but things are looking better. And that concludes my report. We can move on to the town manager's report. Mr. Town Manager.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, a few things I'll do my best to keep mine short as well. But I do want to thank all the volunteers, along with the staff that coordinated the Earth Day cleanup. So we had that on the 20th. The police department's working on the new automated parking enforcement. The conservative implementation date is July 1. We hope to have it up and running before then. The Town Seal Design Committee will meet tomorrow at 7 via Zoom. And it's important to note that we have a public hearing scheduled on May the 6th, which is next Monday, at 7:30 p.m., beginning of the legislative session, and that is for the tax rate for the next fiscal year. Good to note for the mayor and council to note that staff will be coming back in the coming weeks with several pieces of legislation that are built into the budget. That includes the residential enforcement districts, changes to Chapter 64, reference bike lanes, the curbside reservation program, and the multi-family licensing fees. So the curbside reservation is not attached to the budget, but we'll still be bringing that to you all. And then on May 8th, there's a ethics commission meeting, and that's via Zoom. We have our first walk and talk of the spring on Saturday, May 11th. Right now, it's only 24% chance of rain. So we're hoping for a good turnout. Director Barnes will be releasing some information later this week on the route and items. We'll talk more about this at the next week's meeting as well. And separate from direct town business, but something that I'm sure is on the minds of one of our departments tonight, and that's the tragedy that unfolded. And still, they're not sure exactly what occurred in Charlotte, North Carolina, just a short time ago. 3 law enforcement officers killed, 5 additional law enforcement officers are wounded in a shooting. And I know that has to be impacting the men and women that we have in town that are out performing similar duties. So just thoughts and prayers to the folks in Charlotte, North Carolina, and a reassuring message to our own staff that we appreciate the good work that you do for our community and keeping us safe. And that's all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Town Manager, and thank you for mentioning that. And we do appreciate the difficult work that that our public safety staff do each and every day. One other question, financial disclosure reports are due from all members of the council at midnight tomorrow night. Is that correct?
That's correct. And from the staff team as well, for all those that have the long and or short forms. They're due by midnight tomorrow.
Okay, very
Yep.
good. Thank you. This brings us to council, committee, and ward reports, and we'll start with Councilmember Smith, Ward 1.
There's the camera. All right. Let a white balance there and make me not look crazy. Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a great, another great week, another great month to be in Riverdale Park. We got the news today that what is quickly becoming a Ward 1 and Riverdale Park institution, 250 Barbecue, made the New York Times list of the 25 best places to eat in Washington, D.C. So congratulations to the folks at 250. I always feel like a homer when I'm telling area folks that like this is the best food anywhere in the DMV of any sort. But you know, it's not just folks in Riverdale Park or even folks in DC that are talking about it. You know, it's been written up in New York Times and Texas Monthly and Southern Living, even though we're not in the South. Yeah, it's definitely a benefit that we have living here in our community. We're happy to have them and all of our locally owned businesses. So congratulations to 250. As was noted, tomorrow night's town seal meeting is a big one. If you have not been to one and you want to have any input into the town seal, I would say tomorrow night is the best time to have that opportunity. We have narrowed it down to finalists. Finalists have presented proposals that we will, upon selecting a finalist, give feedback on, make adjustments, what have you. So we are approaching the finish line, which I know, or I'm sure Council Member Lingua will agree, we're happy to be at after a long effort here. So exciting to be getting towards that finish line and making some final recommendations and decisions. I want to save the bulk of talk about the Riversdale Mansion Symposium for my colleagues in Ward 2 and Ward 4, who, you know, either represent the district where that park will be or worked to bring that symposium to us here and the funding for it. I just want to say it was an incredible experience to spend a day in a room with folks from all over the country, planning for the future of Riversdale and how our community remembers it and honors it. The term that I wrote down that I kept hearing used across, you know, whether it be town folks in the room, folks from the Riversdale Mansion, folks from Park and Planning, folks from, you know, literally across the country, was there were a lot of big brains in the room. When we're talking like the who's who of award-winning designers of public spaces, all coming to our community to help us think through how we do it justice. And I think everyone there was on board with our intent and loved what we were working to do. And just to stipulate, the Plummer Park was a portion of what we talked about there, a lot more to do with the mansion, but the part that we have direct oversight for as a council is the park. They had some great ideas for making it better and ensuring that it is a place that honors the legacy of the Plummer family, and that it's not just, you know, a grass field that has a sign with somebody's name on it, right? We have an opportunity to educate and honor, and I think we should ensure we seize upon that. So I hope, and we have presented or proposed this to some of the folks that were in the room, the experts that we had on hand, and they were interested in coming to present and speak what we discussed and what we learned and recommendations. I hope we will provide them that opportunity, because it's some really special stuff. So talked about that more than I intended to already. I'll let my colleagues share more. In terms of the budget, again, thank you as always to staff from every department and in putting together the budget book, the series of agenda items and hearings and emails and texts from council and everyone else. I know we recognize as a council that it is not a light undertaking and appreciate all the work that went into it. And I think it's a great document. I I do maintain some concerns, particularly with one, automated enforcement, which you know, I won't beat a dead horse on. I think folks that have been to these meetings know how I feel about it. I do hope intend to offer some amendments as we discuss the budget to reprogram some of that money. I do not or shall we say I'm realistic about the fate of those. I do not intend to take up and waste the council's time, but I do think it is worth you know, having in the record that there was an alternate point of view raised and discussed. So happy to work with mayor, council, town's manager to assure that that happens expeditiously and that I don't waste people's time. But I think it's important to me, and it's important to some of my constituents in the discussions that I've had. I have similar concern about the additional public safety position, and that being a uniform position. From how it's been explained to me, I still don't understand why that has to be a uniform position. You know, on the rare occasions that folks challenge automated tickets and go into court, from what I understand, and I'm willing to be corrected, you know, that's mostly sending someone from the town to testify that these are the procedures we have in place and they were followed. I'm happy to talk through more, and Mr. Town Manager, I am certainly cognizant and sensitive to the fact that managing the staff is within your purview, not ours as a council. You know, this is our opportunity to weigh in on it. And so I hope you don't take anything negative from my concerns about that in the process there. Fully recognize your role, but as I hear from my constituents often, you know, the police department takes up the majority of our budget, and they are the only entity in our community that has the monopoly on violence. And I think that for all the good they do, that does come with extra scrutiny. And additionally, you know, as was raised, you know, folks in Charlotte are on my mind tonight, and the fact that we have people in harm's way as a town doing the similar work. And I'm interested in finding ways to ensure that we are not unnecessarily putting people in roles where they have to be in that similar harm's way. So happy to have more conversations about that. Looking forward to those discussions as we talk through the budget and getting that towards passage. And I think that is all I have for tonight, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Excuse me, I was muted. Mr. Town Manager, your hand is up. Go ahead.
Yes, I just had one comment, and I'll keep it very short. As it relates to sworn or unsworn positions, it's my understanding that the legislation that the state was considering, where non-sworn members would be able to participate in review and issuance of automated enforcement, failed. And so I don't believe that that'll come up again until perhaps next year, and we certainly can look at things then. I just wanted to share, I believe that legislation failed.
Okay, I was not tracking that after at the end of the session, so it may have. Okay, Councilmember Foe, Ward 2.
Good evening, everyone. I intend to withhold a majority of my comments until next week's legislative meeting. But the council member did a really good job of encapsulating what we experienced at Riversdale a few weeks ago. It was a tremendous experience. I'm not ready to summarize it, put a bow on it for distribution for the community. I'm not in that place yet, but it was remarkably well organized, and I just want to say thank you to Councilmember Inyang, Betsy Otto, who brought the Loeb discussion to the forefront for us, Maya Davis, and so many wonderful and brilliant thinkers for participating in a dialogue that I was shocked to be included in. I'll speak more to that next week. It it was one of my favorite things I've ever done in my entire life, and I can't wait to share more about that experience in the upcoming weeks. So thank you very much. Have a good evening, and I yield.
Thank you, Councilmember Foe. Councilmember
Lingua.
Lingua. I was looking for you, and my list of people was in a different place, so you are there. Go ahead.
Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I received a letter from one of my constituents, letter dated April 20th, asking about the possibility of the town, if the town would consider supporting a resolution calling or advocating for a ceasefire in Gaza. What I understand from the letter, my neighbor is part of an informal group that's been using any means that they have available to advocate for a stop to the genocide, their words, in Gaza. And they're just finding that at the level that they were been approaching so far, that they feel their efforts have been in vain. So they've decided to turn their efforts to a more local level for advocacy. According to the letter, the towns of Cheverly, Colmar Manor, and the city of College Park have passed such resolutions in support of a ceasefire in Gaza. And they're asking if they'd, what they would like to see, that our town pass a similar resolution in support of a ceasefire. According to the letter, there are several folks in town who are working on a draft similar to the one that was used by Cheverly and Colmar Manor. I'm going to be in touch with them, and I'm going to ask them if they can have a draft ready for the upcoming legislative that we can look at under new business and discuss. At that point, if we feel comfortable with it, consider taking a vote on it, or if we feel we need to have more discussion on it, to do so.
Does that complete your report?
That it does.
Okay. Do you want to discuss that under new business this evening, or do you want to wait until next week?
I think really next week. I mean, it would be good to have a draft resolution. It'd be good for us to be able to get our hands on what was done in Colmar Manor, in Cheverly, and in Tacoma Park as well. Look at what they have. I think it's really, looking at what language they've used, and then really also give folks time to talk with residents in their ward and see how they feel.
Okay.
Well, not a light matter, and there's a wide and varied opinions on what's happening over there and how it's happened.
Okay.
So.
Of course, any other council member can bring it up under new business this evening if you choose
Sure,
to do
if they want.
Okay.
I just think
Okay.
it might be a little premature.
Thank you, council member. Well, it may, if there's strong opinion against, then that might be better to discuss before the letter is written. But
Okay.
as I said, that can happen under new business. And we are in reports now. So let's continue on to council member Inyang, Ward 4.
Good evening. I will try to keep this short because I know we're already in the 9 o'clock hour. One, I just want to thank staff for the budget discussions that happened over the last month or so. I know they are long. I know a lot of work went into them even ahead of the meeting. So definitely appreciate the ability to sort of organize all that information and present it in a way that the public in town and council can sort of digest it. And one thing I'm looking forward to as we think about sort of this idea of carving out funds for sort of micro grants that the town provides. I think using it as an opportunity to sort of think holistically about how we engage the community, business leaders, organizations about how they can take ownership and sort of participate in this. And I think this positive growing trend of more events, more engagement across the town. And so having money dedicated to that to sort of like act as an inspiration, I'm really, really excited about what that can do. As some of my fellow council members mentioned, the Loeb Fellows, the sort of Harvard School of Design, fellows who came in and toured our community and talked to members of the community about sort of our history and opportunity. I think it was definitely a powerful event and something that looking forward to sort of having a larger discussion with council and what was discussed and what's possible there, but definitely feeling reinvigorated from just the intentionality and sort of having. I think anytime you can get experts in the room talking about something as important as this is a humbling experience, and so definitely appreciate that. And then just lastly, received an email from a resident in the Massilla neighborhood about the request for street sweeping on Silk Tree Drive, mainly because the storm pond maintenance upgrades that have been happening from the county is sort of one of the reasons. I think they've also talked about sort of road repairs due to the transitioning of like several dump trucks in the area. And so it's something that I can see who's on this. I think Neighborhood Concerns was emailed on this, as well as me and the mayor. But happy to forward the email for additional information to town staff if necessary. I asked during the budget meeting about sort of road repairs. I believe a study was done. And so it would be good to sort of, good to have a larger conversation about the integrity or the sort of state of the roads, and if there's sort of a plan and what that looks like. Looking at the tree study that we just had, I think was really impressive, and I'm always sort of looking to see what other sort of like structural infrastructure elements in our town do we need to be tracking and monitoring over the years, and roads are another one of those things too that can easily be ignored. And so if there's something that work that's already been done, I appreciate having a larger conversation on that whenever we're ready for that. And with that, I will yield the rest of my time.
Thank you, Councilmember Enyang. Councilmember Mejia.
Good evening. I have no I'm sorry. I was eating something spicy, my mouth burning.
Okay, no report tonight?
No
Thank you.
report for tonight.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Town Manager, you had a comment on Councilmember Enyang's report, perhaps?
Yes, I was just going to say that the staff are aware of the concerns on Silk Tree, and Director Lewis has been in touch back with the county. We really need the county to do a better job of cleanup, because it's really not made for a street sweeper. Director Lewis, if you want to add on to that briefly.
Actually, I do. I met with the county staff on site last Friday. And in fact, on my way into the development, I took the time to sort of look at conditions along the roadway, and it looks pretty good in terms of the work around the retention area. They've brought in a lot of mulch, which they intend to take with them when they leave because they could use it at other sites. So I thought overall the streets look pretty good. Councilmember Yin Yang, about 2 years ago, working with one of our on-call engineers, we did a town-wide road assessment. And have actually been, I think we've completed all of the roads that were rated 4 as fair or poor since that time. We were actually in Madison Hill 2 years ago and did from sort of repatching to slurry sealing. And so the roads look pretty good. If you'd like to take a walk through there and maybe show me what residents may have pointed out to you, I'd be willing to do that. But overall, it looks pretty good.
Thank you. I think it was, I believe it was sort of concerns around the cleanup effort that they were doing, but I plan on probably taking a look through maybe later this week. So if I notice something, I'll reach out to the resident as well. And if needed, we can find some time to talk about it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Mejia, Councilmember Kellogg, Ward 6.
Hello, everybody. Good evening, everybody. Today, I don't have much to say. The only thing, I'm happy when the town manager and staff, when they fix that drainage over there by the McDonald's, because that place has been dangerous for vehicles and the pedestrians. But now, they fix it. But Mr. Mayor, what is the best time tomorrow to call you on your PV? I want you to enlighten me about something.
The best time to call me tomorrow, hold on just a moment. I have to check out my work calendar, and they make me punch in a lot of numbers before I can do that. Tomorrow is not great.
What about Wednesday?
Wednesday is much better. So Wednesday at say 5:30 p.m.
5:30? Okay. I will call you Wednesday. I want you to enlighten me about something.
Okay, very good.
All right, I stop there now. Thank you.
Okay, that is the end of committee and ward reports. So that brings us to public comments. Are there any public comments this evening? Hearing none, we can move on to work session discussion items. And item number 1 is fence permit request 4819 Longfellow Street, 6-foot wood fence.
Director Barnes.
Good evening, Mayor Thompson and members of the council. Staff seek direction from the mayor and council tonight regarding a fence permit at 4819 Longfellow Street. This is for an approximately 6-foot wood fence and the backyard of the property. This is replacing a wood fence that is there currently with a newer version. The resident is, I'm not sure, I didn't see Mr. Knight in attendance, but he is has gone through the process with the county. He's gotten his permit, and he appears to have met all of the administrative requirements for the fence permit application.
Thank you, Director Barnes. Is there any council discussion of this discussion item?
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Knowing Mr. Knight, I'm sure he has dotted his I's and crossed his T's with the utmost of care. And this is pretty much a straightforward replacement thing that he has gone through the paces of providing all the necessary paperwork up front as compared to the myriad of ex post facto permits we've passed over the years. As my grandmother would say, if I had a nickel for every time. Anyway, I would ask the council's consent that this be put on the consent agenda.
I will, unless I hear objections, then I will plan to do that. It's the fence replacements, I'm not nearly so concerned about, so. And it does look like this one is due for a replacement. The photos didn't look very good. Okay, I saw one thumbs up. Unless I hear any objections, then it will go on the consent agenda for next week. Next item on the agenda are Walk Bike Drive Advisory Committee appointments. I gave up about 45 minutes of sleep late last night to review the list of applicants. I sent a few emails out. I'm hoping to hear back and talk to those applicants this week, and we'll plan to bring the recommended membership. I will note that we did not have any applicants from Riverdale Elementary School identifying their affiliation as Riverdale Elementary School. Is there any way that staff could reach out to the school and see if there's someone who is willing to have that position? And we had multiple applicants in all other areas. Actually, I believe there's only one person who specified that they were a business owner, and but I believe one of the others who applied is a business owner and have reached out for clarification on that. So anyway, I will be bringing a list of recommended members for the committee next week. Any questions? Okay, let's move on to discussion item 3, Walk Bike Drive Safety Initiative, Stopping, Standing, Parking, and Bike Lanes, amendments to Chapter 64.
Acting Chief Turner.
Yes, good evening. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, no formal action is requested in tonight's work session. Instead, staff seek an opportunity to share with the mayor and council proposed amendments to Chapter 64 of the Town Code to prohibit stopping, standing, and parking in bike lanes. At the May 6th legislative meeting, staff requested mayor and council introduce a ordinance, Chapter 24-OR-04 regarding stopping, standing of vehicles. In support of the town's vision and commitment to transportation, and more specifically to town's walk, bike, and drive safety initiative, staff recommend revisions to Chapter 64. Following the mayor and council support of the proposed revisions, staff worked with town attorney Fred Sussman to draft ordinance 24-OR-04 regarding stopping and standing of vehicles. Attached, please find a draft ordinance for the mayor and council to review. And again, staff requests the mayor and council introduce the ordinance at the May 6th legislative meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Acting Chief Turner. Council, any discussion of this item? Councilmember Lingua, go ahead.
I have no problem with that introduction.
Okay. Any other council comments? Are there any public comments? Oh, Councilmember Enyang, go ahead.
Just for my so first off, I'm super excited about this. I'm looking forward to it being put on the agenda and passed. And this would end up being a town ordinance, and I believe there was some discussion on whether or not there was a state law for this or a county law. Are there existing, like from a state and county perspective, that sort of this falls under, or would just be like we're filling a gap that we've noticed in the law for this?
So
Mr. Town Manager, go ahead. Staff can answer this.
The Chapter 64 is what gives us the authority to enforce parking regulations in the town. So there is not a state law for driving or parking in a bike lane. However, this gives the town police the authority to enforce it in the town of Riverdale Park.
Okay.
And Chief, can you clarify that gives us authority to enforce the parking, but driving into and driving through a bike lane is not prohibited by the town. That would have to be prohibited by the state. Is that correct?
That's correct. Thank you for clarifying that.
So to clarify, Councilmember Yang, we don't have the authority to prohibit driving, but we do have the authority to prohibit parking. So we're doing what we can at this time.
Got it. Thank you. Appreciate
And
it.
I believe our delegation introduced legislation, but I don't believe that made it through. I need to check in with them on that status of that legislation, which I could do shortly. Any additional council questions or comments? Are there any public comments? So I have one question which doesn't have to do with any of the amendments. I just wanted to understand the enforcement of the first part of 64-6. It says no vehicle shall be stopped in any of the following places except when necessary to avoid conflict with other traffic. And then there's some other exemptions. Does that mean that they can pull over if somebody's tailgating them, or what's the criteria for enforcing that?
So I would think that you could pull over to avoid a collision.
Okay. Okay, that makes sense to me. I just wanted to be sure I understood that. Okay, any additional council or public comments or questions on this legislation? Okay, I think we can introduce that next week with no issue. Discussion item number 4, moving on, fiscal year 2024 revenue update.
Deputy Director Jones.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight's revenue update includes revenue from the beginning of the fiscal year up to April 26th for the current fiscal year, and then compares the 3 previous fiscal years. They have 5 major revenue categories, first being local taxes. For fiscal year 2024, that total is $6,861,560. For fiscal year 2023, that figure was $6,709,086. 2022, $6,681,000, and fiscal year 2021, we had a total of $6,530,000. Currently, as far as where we are in the current fiscal year, we are at 92% of what we had budgeted. So the expectation is that the town will receive all of the revenue for fiscal year 2024 that was budgeted. The next major category is licenses and permits. The total for the current fiscal year is $181,382. The previous fiscal year was up a little bit higher, had a total of $218,000. 2022 was $199,000, and 2021 we had a total of $222,000. The explanation for the decline in 2024 revenue would be the multifamily rental licenses. We actually, in fact, budgeted a lower amount because that was the expectation there. For that line item, we're actually at 116% of what was budgeted. So we have surpassed what was budgeted there. So while that number is lower than the previous fiscal year, that was expected. The next major category is administrative fees. This includes abatement charges and municipal infractions. Currently, revenue sits at $22,650. The previous fiscal year, that figure was $33,810. For fiscal year 2022, we were at $5,400, and then 2021, $1,400. So for this particular line item, it does vary by year. If there aren't any infractions, that number won't be as high. But again, our neighborhood service team is doing a great job ensuring that the town code is being upheld there. The next major category is fines and forfeitures, which includes police reports, vehicle impounds, and parking citations. The total right now for fiscal year 2024, $34,670. Previous fiscal year at this point, that figure was $39,480. 2022, $32,243. And then fiscal year 2021, $36,837. And the last category is the Safe Speed for Students. I'm sorry, Community Safety Programs, which includes the Safe Speed for Students. The total for the current fiscal year is $909,000. Previous fiscal year, we were at $1,072,217. The year before that, even higher at $1,157,000. And 2021, that figure was just $752,000. Consistent with what we've been communicating to the mayor and council, speed camera revenue is not the most reliable, as it does fluctuate. So again, we're typically pretty consistent when it comes to budgeting and being conservative. But with that said, currently at 88% for Safe Speed for Students. And we do expect to fully realize the full budgeted amount. Currently, at 88%, and we still have 4 months left of speed camera revenue to record, as we always receive that revenue 2 months back. So, that's where we stand for community safety programs. So the total amount that we have is $8,009,285. The previous fiscal year, $8,072,923. The year before that, $8,076,000, and then fiscal year 2021, we were just at $7,543,000. So, in comparison to the previous 2 fiscal years, we are down a bit, but we still expect to hit our estimated actuals and surpass the budgeted revenue amount that we have there. So yes, that concludes the revenue reports, and if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Deputy Director. Councilmember Enyang, go ahead.
Thank you for the presentation. Only question was just around sort of vehicle impounds and the numbers sort of consistently on the higher side relative to sort of parking citations. Is the idea that, like, I guess, do we tow a lot of cars without parking citations? Or I remember once seeing like a huge orange sign on a car that was parked, I guess abandoned. And so is the idea, I know parking citations have been, I feel like they were down as we were sort of transitioning to the new system, but vehicle impounds seem to be closely on schedule. Are they correlated at all, or do we actually just have a lot of like towed cars that I'm just not aware of, and be curious about that line item?
Chief Turner.
Yes, sir. So we tow impound cars for lots of reasons. The majority are probably motor vehicle accidents, and the small amount is parking. So we may also tow a car from traffic stops for registration violations or suspended driver's license or actual DUI arrests and such. So a small percentage is for parking violations.
Thank you. That makes more sense. Thank you.
Any additional questions for Deputy Director? Okay, thank you, Deputy Director Jones. Appreciate the report and the update. That brings us to discussion item 5, excuse me, not fine, 5. Update on bus stop improvements, CIP project 20DS02.
Director Shelton, can you walk us through this, please?
I'd be happy to. Good evening, Mayor and Council, and members of the public. I'd like to provide an update on the bus shelter improvement project. Recently, I've been to a council meeting where I provided an update that the project had gone out to bid, but we had received only one bid, and that bid was much higher than our engineer's estimates. The project later went out for bid a second time, but this time we did not receive any responses. It is the town engineer's suggestion that the scale of our project may not be enough to put it on the radar of a larger vendor's radar. So town staff sought to ride a contract from a neighboring municipality or another jurisdiction, and unfortunately, we were unable to find a suitable contract. So tonight, staff are suggesting that we're requesting that we waive the competitive bidding requirements for the selection of a contractor for this project. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Director Shelton. Questions or comments from members of the council? Councilmember Lingua.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Shelton, could you remind council as to how high the loan bid, how much, if you want to put it as a percentage even, over what we estimated it would be?
Yes, it was greater than 400% of what the engineers had estimated.
Really? 400%. Yikes. That's high. So what's the expectation if we go to a non-competitive process?
There are a handful of vendors that staff have in mind that we can begin discussions with to try to see if they are interested in our project after meeting with them, discussing it one-on-one. It's our opinion that, or it's a town engineer's opinion that likely the scope of the amount of bus shelters that we're considering right now is not enough to put on the radar of the much larger vendors, the ones that would handle a large municipality, like for example, Washington, D.C. or something like that. So it's our hope that we can get in front of the vendors much easier if we're able to just waive the competitive bidding process.
And Mr. Shelton, is it correct that we would bring any contract proposal back to the mayor and council, presuming that it exceeds $20,000 for their consideration at that time?
Absolutely, yes.
And just so I'm understanding clearly as well as the council, so that this waiver would be similar to what we did for the streetlight projects, where we ran into similar issues, and we put together working with contractors proposal, brought it back to the council. And I think we've completed one of those projects and the other one's near completion.
It would be very similar, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Director Shelton, what's the what was the engineer's estimate for the cost?
I only had the fact that it was 4 times as much. I'm going to.
Okay, if you could get that to me offline, I'd appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Any other discussion of this item by council or members of the public? Okay, let's move on to discussion item number 6, traffic control signage ratification.
Director Lewis.
Good evening again. No formal action is being requested on this agenda item this evening. Instead, at the May 6th legislative meeting, staff will ask the council to ratify parking restrictions established by Public Works through signage in several neighborhoods in town. Chapter 64, Section 64.3 of the Town Code authorizes both Public Works and the Police Department to impose temporary parking restrictions in emergency situations. Staff installed 23 signs restricting parking since May in response to residents' concerns. 17 signs were installed in Riverdale Park Station. 3 of them were no parking in loading zones, and 14 were no parking here to corner. And 6 no parking signs were installed on Riverdale Road between Lafayette Avenue and Oliver Street. These signs are temporary until the council ratifies the actions of Public Works. And with that, I'll take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Lewis. Are there questions for the director? Councilmember Enyang, go ahead.
Yes, I appreciate sort of staff installing a lot of these signs in Riverdale Park Station. There's been a lot of concern around intersection daylighting, and so the ability, people parking right up until the edge of the roadways, making it really hard to sort of see pedestrians and bicyclists, and the idea of using mirrors. And so if the town staff, I think Director Lewis, your suggestion was sort of enforcing these parking restrictions to sort of alleviate those concerns. I think the other side of this is just the enforcement of it. I think the signs are pretty clear now, and I think I have sort of seen areas where you have seen improvement, like Rhode Island Avenue, south of Woodbury before Van Buren. The space between the last parking slot and like that alleyway could fit like 1.5 cars, and it would always be full. And now it's rarely ever anyone parking in it. But I do see other areas where it's not necessarily being followed. And so I just would just urge that these signs are great. And I think it makes it clear that if people do get tickets, they can't complain because it leaves very little ambiguity, but that it has to be sort of a two-pronged approach with the parking enforcement. But I'm definitely in favor of these signs.
Thank you, council member. Any additional council questions for the director or comments? Are there any public comments on this item? Councilmember Lingua, your hand took a little while to go up. Go ahead.
Well, it takes a little while to move screens around. This is an issue that we see in other areas of town. People parking right up to the curb, people, parking right up to where, a stop line is and a stop sign is. So I guess what my question is there any way that we're going to be able to address some of these instances in other parts of town?
Director Lewis, if I could respond to that.
Okay.
I believe, Councilmember Lingua, the short answer is yes. The next step, I think, and it may simplify this, is for us to have either amendments to Chapter 64 or policy direction to staff that it's the policy of the town to have signs installed like we've done here under the temporary authority. And then as these are identified, then the town staff would simply be able to act as opposed to having to come back to the council and discuss and then move forward. So I think having either an amendment or a policy statement would be helpful to staff in reacting to these situations and being proactive as well.
Okay, well, if memory serves me well, I know that I think there are a few clauses in 64 already that talk about distances from stop signs, distances from intersections already. I think it may be less about installing new signs, and it may just more be about a concerted effort education-wise for folks, be that through the crier, town website, any number of other options, along with some paint upon curbs, right, at stop signs, yellow curbs, to really start addressing that. I mean, you're coming in with a parking automated, parking enforcement program coming up. I mean, it can almost dovetail with that.
We certainly can take those steps, sir. And Director Barnes, if you can make note to wrap this up in our educational areas as well.
Any additional council questions or comments on this item? Okay, I've lost my copy of the agenda. Here it is. Well, any public comments? Any members of the public still here? Yes, there are. Okay, no public comments. Item 7 is minutes. Everyone should review them carefully and get back to staff if there are any issues that you find. And hopefully there will be, there aren't anything except maybe a occasional comma or misspelling. Councilmember Smith. Are you still, there you are. Councilmember Smith, I added an item number 8, which is not on the written agenda, to discuss the budget because it sounded like you wanted to. Did you have your discussion during your report, or do you have anything else you want to discuss with the whole council?
I think that I prefer to have it closer to when we actually vote on the budget. I've had some good conversations with staff and with fellow council members. As I mentioned earlier, I'm under no delusion about the likely fate of what I plan to offer. So I intend to offer it in a way that takes as little of the council's time as possible, and most importantly, creates as little disruption for staff as possible. And I'm not prepared to offer it in that way this evening. So I appreciate waiting till a later date, and we can coordinate as such.
Okay, and I'm happy to work with you also on ways that you might introduce this. Are there?
I
Does
appreciate
anyone
that. I'll be in touch, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Okay. Does anyone else wish to discuss items of the budget this evening, or should we just have that at future meetings? Any members of the public who wish to discuss anything in the budget this evening? Okay, that brings us to new business. Are there any items of new business?
Yes, Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Callan.
You said you're going to inquire about the 54th place. I don't know whether you have done that or not for office space.
For office space, whether the developer would be interested?
Yeah, the office space in 54th place, yeah. Yeah.
I could address that, Mr. Mayor.
Go ahead, Mr. Town Manager. I was trying to remember if I'd spoken to the attorney, but go ahead.
So I did send a letter to their attorney outlining the council's position on the development, and left open the idea that if it was a development that better fit zoning and better fit the town's vision and commitment statements, that that's something that the town would entertain. And that letter went out to their attorney probably close to a week ago.
Did he reply you?
He's acknowledged receipt, but that's all.
Okay, well, let's wait for them to reply.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other, I would have put that under unfinished business, but it's the work session, so I'm not going to worry about it. Any items of new business or unfinished business this evening? Okay, well, we don't need a motion to adjourn. We just have to leave. So thank you all for a great meeting, good discussions this evening, and see you next week.
Thank you.
Everyone. Good night.
Night. Have a